Hello everybody and welcome to today's session, Recommended Certifications for Azure Synapse Enthusiasts. Now in this 45-minute session, I want to help you with decisions that you need to make about certifications. So to manage some expectations for all of you here, here's the agenda for what we're going to cover. So I have to do the obligatory bio first. Then I will cover why to gain certifications. Then I'll do an introduction about role-based certifications and highlight why they're ones you have to focus on now. Then I will cover Azure Synapse certifications, and whilst covering them, I will introduce some recommended routes along the way, and of course give an overview of what these certifications cover. And then I will provide some advice for all of you as well. So by the end of this session, you'll have a better idea of what certifications you can do relating to Azure Synapse Analytics. And in addition to that, you will have plenty of advice, which is why ideally I will look to answer all the questions towards the end. So during the session, like Justin said, just put your questions in the chat. We'll go through those at the end of the session. So a bit about myself before we get started. So my name is Kevin Chant. I'm a manager for Avanade in the Netherlands. However, as some of you might be able to tell from the accent, I'm actually originally from the southwest of the UK. So basically, I'm an Englishman, graduated in Wales, living in the Netherlands because he met a woman in Australia. Now, if you kept up with all of that, you're in a good place for this session. Now, I've worked in IT since the days of Windows 95, and that's probably as much as I should say about that. And during that time, I've had experience in various sectors, including the banking, oil, and health insurance industries. Over the years, I've gained various certifications, including both the old and the new style MCSE, and some of the role-based certifications you can see on the screen. I'm also a microsite certified trainer, and I'm what's known as a dual category MVP because I currently have awards for both data platform and developer technologies. Now, you can find me in a few various different places online. You can see it on the slide. I actually say that you can find me on Twitter at KevChant. I'm also on a very similar handle on Mastodon as well, and I'll share that one at the end of the session. My LinkedIn's got a nice user-friendly URL. I have my own blog where I cover a lot of topics relating to the data platform and developer technologies. And I have my own GitHub site as well. So anybody can go on there and download various repositories that you can use as a template to do various things. For example, CI/CD for Azure Synapse Analytics SQL pools. And in case anybody was wondering, that's for both serverless and dedicated SQL pools. Anyway, why should you look to gain certifications? It's a very common topic that people talk about. So, one of the main reasons is to formalize your knowledge. For example, if you've worked with a product like Power BI for a certain amount of time, then it's good to get a certification to show that you know what you're talking about as far as that is concerned. In addition to that, it can also help fill in knowledge gaps. So, for example, if you look to study for one of the certifications that I'll be covering in this session, there's a very good chance that you will improve your Power BI knowledge along the way. In addition to that, you get an appreciation of how services interact with each other, because a lot of the time, while you're studying for these certifications, it will show you how to work with one service that connects to another. And finally, it's becoming more of a requirement for enterprises. Now, many years ago, a lot of companies required people to have the older MCSA and MCSE certifications before they would let them work in the industry. However, that requirement, I personally think, died down over the years. However, after a while, the cloud was introduced, and all of a sudden, you've got all these different services that can appear. So, Now, enterprises want peace of mind that there's not going to be any security risks with their services. So that's why a lot of them are now saying that they want people to be certified in certain technologies before they look to use them. And to give you an actual real world example of this, here in the Netherlands, ABN AMRO announced a while ago that their staff could only use Power BI Pro if they passed the Power BI Data Analyst certification. So, to help emphasize the fact even that role-based certifications are the ones that you must study for now, I thought I'd share part of my own personal certification history with all of you. So, many years ago, I gained the old MCSA and MCSE certifications. And back then, the MCSA stood for Microsoft Certified Systems Administrator, and the MCSE stood for Microsoft Certified Systems Engineer. And that was fine. And then when I actually looked to renew my certifications, I found I had to gain what was called MCTS and MCITP certifications. So the MCTS stood for Microsoft Certified Technology Specialist, and the MCITP stood for Microsoft Certified IT Professional, which was fine. So I adapted and passed the exams for those certifications. Then I went to look to renew my certifications for newer versions of technologies, like newer versions of SQL. And as I was about to do that, Microsoft announced they were actually changing the certification types to be called, again, MCSA and MCSE. However, this time out, MCSA stood for Microsoft Certified Solutions Associate, and MCSE stood for Microsoft Certified Solutions Expert. So I went and gained those certifications, and at the time, obviously the cloud was picking up more momentum. And after a while, Microsoft then announced that actually you would have to now study for role-based certifications. And the main reason I've gone through this path with yourselves is to highlight the fact that the exams for all of the below certifications you can see on the screen now are all retired. That includes MCDBA, both the old and the new style MCSE, MCITP, etc. And there's two main reasons I want to share this with all of you. First reason is there's still some resources online that say you can go and gain these certifications when you can't. And in addition to that, if you are looking for a new position, you might get a better idea about what technologies they're using by what certifications they are showing in the job ad. And on a side note to that, if you have any influence in your company's job ads, you might want to check to make sure it doesn't mention these certifications, because believe it or not, a while back, I actually saw MCDBA mentioned in a job spec. And for those who aren't aware, MCDBA is a certification for SQL Server 2000. Well, now that part is out of the way, let's look at role-based certifications, which are the newest certifications from Microsoft that you must look to do. And these certifications come at 3 levels, which are Fundamentals, Associate, and Expert. And you can also think of these certifications as 1-star, 2-star, and 3-star certifications, because when you get the Fundamentals certification, you get a badge that has 1 star on there. For the Associate certifications, they contain 2 stars. And for the Expert certifications, it's 3 stars. Now, there are some specialized certifications you can get outside of these role-based certifications as well. For example, you can get one for Cosmos DB. Now, I just want to quickly touch on fundamental certifications before I dive too far into the recommended Synapse certifications. So there are 3 main fundamental certifications that most data platform professionals tend to go for at the moment, which are the Azure Fundamental Certification, which covers the basics of Azure, basically, including cost management. Then there's the Data Platform Fundamentals certification, which basically introduces you to all of the services that come with the Microsoft Data Platform. And it gives you a better understanding of relational and non-relational data as well. And then finally, there's the Power Platform Fundamentals certification, which covers the Power Platform family, including Power BI and Power Automate. Now, with the recent popularity in ChatGPT, I really suspect that pretty soon a lot more data platform professionals will be looking to gain the Azure AI certifications, including the one for Azure AI Fundamentals. And the main reason I bring up these fundamental certifications is because I cover some shortly. And I want you all to remember that these recommendations are optional, but recommended. Anyway, if there are no questions in the chat, I will cover the certifications. So the first Azure Synapse Analytics certification I want to cover is the Azure Data Engineer Associate certification. Now, this particular certification covers the services that Microsoft deemed are used most often for data engineering solutions. And it's safe to say that this certification has evolved over time. For example, in the past, Azure SQL and Azure Cosmos DB were both included as part of the skills measured for this certification. However, they have both since been removed and are now part of other certifications that you can gain. Plus, when this certification was first released, you had to pass two separate exams to gain a certification, which was the DP200 and the DP201. However, now you just need to pass the DP203 exam to gain this certification. And the main reason I want to share this with all of you is because there are still resources online that say you have to pass those two exams. Please ignore those and just focus on doing the DP203 exam. Now, this exam has got reasonable breadth of services involved. And to give you an example of that, here is a diagram that's loosely based on the Microsoft solution idea for advanced analytics. And quite a few of these services are included in the actual skills measured for the certification, including IoT Hub, Stream Analytics, Data Factory, Data Lake Storage, Databricks, and of course, Azure Synapse Analytics. And I can actually show you the skills measured now. So if we go to the certification page, as you can see here, and I scroll down, I want to highlight two important things here. First of all, there's a blue box telling you that on February the 6th, the skills measured for this exam is going to change. So please be aware of that if you're currently studying for this exam, because that's just over a week's time, basically. So here you get a link to the actual exam page, which I've already opened up earlier. And if you scroll down here, again, you get reminded that the skills measured are going to change. And if you scroll down, you'll see there's a very nice green tick box here. And this has a link to the study guide. Now, the study guide, which I've already opened up in another tab, is a PDF file which you can actually download for use and contains a lot of interesting material. For example, if you want to see what skills have been measured as from February the 6th, you can just quickly click on the link and scroll down. And if I scroll down here, you can see there's quite a few different services mentioned. For example, Data Lake Storage, Azure Synapse Analytics, now a little bit of Purview, and how to work with pipelines in Azure Synapse Analytics and Data Factory. Something to be aware of, if you're working with pipelines in Azure Data Factory and Azure Synapse and you're studying for the exam material, the objects for them are found in different places in these two services. And I can actually show you that if we go over to here into Data Factory Studio. So in Data Factory Studio, as you can see, pipelines, data sets, and mapping data flows are all very nicely together in the Author Hub. However, it's safe to say they're in different places in Azure Synapse Analytics. So you can find the pipelines in the Integrate Hub, you can find the data sets in the Data Hub, and you will find the mapping data flows in the Develop Hub. So I just wanted you all to bear that in mind if you're looking at both types of pipelines. Anyway, my recommended route, if you're looking to gain this certification, is to do the DP900 first, which is the exam for the Azure Data Fundamentals certification, and then do the DP203 exam afterwards. And the main reason I recommend this is because if you do the DP900 exam, as well as giving you a better understanding for the Microsoft Data Platform services, it will give you that good foundation of knowledge that you need for the relational and non-relational data that's covered as part of the DP203 exam. So, the other week, I had a very interesting question raised to me by somebody about what if they want to gain a data platform certification and then they want to look to gain the Microsoft Certified DevOps Engineer certification. And my answer was very similar to this, with the only difference being I recommended a different exam from the 203 because they wanted to do the database administrator certification. So what I'm basically saying here is that if you are looking to do multiple competencies for role-based certifications, I would focus on the data platform ones first, and then look to do the other certifications afterwards. Especially if you're looking to do, for example, the Azure Architect certification, because there's actually a bit of a crossover of knowledge there. And you actually need some data platform knowledge for the Azure Architect certification. So, and it also helps reduce context switching as well. And I just see a question appear in the chat here. So even though I said I'd deal with questions at the end, I will quickly answer this one now. So would you recommend getting a data engineer certification, aspiring to become a data engineer, or only for current engineers with 1 or more years experience? And to be completely honest with you, if you're aspiring to become a data engineer, I would look to do the Azure Data Fundamentals certification first. And then after you've gained that certification, see how you feel about looking to gain the Azure Data Engineer certification afterwards. Because the reality is your interest may change along the way. So I hope that answers the question okay for you. And if not, feel free to ask any follow-up questions, etc. And I will do my best to answer them. And very kindly, my moderators put a link to the fundamentals in the chat for you all. And on that note, before I forget, thank you very much for reminding me, Justin. I will actually put a link into the chat for the certification page for Azure Data, for the Data Engineer Associate certification. So the next certification I want to cover is the Azure Enterprise Data Analyst Associate certification, which I think we can all agree is a little bit of a mouthful, which is why more people commonly know that it's the certification you get when you pass the DP500 exam. And I will put a link for this certification in the chat as well. So this certification focuses on visualization, analytics, and governance. So in other words, it mostly focuses on Power BI, Azure Synapse, and Purview. And you need a little bit of data lake storage knowledge as well for this one. And as you can probably imagine, because it focuses more on less services than the Azure Data Engineer Associate certification. It goes into more depth of these 3 services, so that you need to pay more attention to those 3. And to highlight this fact, let's look at the DP 500 study guide. So if you go to the certification page, you can then navigate directly to the exam page like I've done here. Now, bit of a tip for all of you here. If you want to switch between the different exam pages and you know the actual numbers, what you can actually do is directly change the URL at the top of the page to be the different exam number. So here, if I wanted to, I could change the DP 500 to the DP 203, and that will direct me straight to the other exam page. So just a bit of exam page navigation advice there. Anyway, if I scroll down, another thing I want to highlight, again, this exam will also change on February the 6th. To be honest with you, it's expected. All 3 of these products have changed a lot since this exam was first introduced last year. And to highlight this, some of you may have seen how Purview first looked when it was first introduced. Well, this is how Purview currently looks. And as you can see, the studio has changed a bit over time. And in fact, just the other day, they introduced a way for you to scan Azure Databricks, which is currently in preview. So anyway, if we go back to the exam material, you can see that you can get a study guide, which I've already got opened up here. And if you follow the links, we can see the skills measured as of February the 6th. So if I scroll down, you can see that Purview is predominantly mentioned in the first section. And if we scroll further down here, you can see that Synapse and Power BI are actually mentioned as headings for different sections. So just wanted to highlight for you all that's here. And in fact, if I go, I think it's to page 6 on this one, you can actually view as well a change log. And this is in the other study guide as well. And this will show you what changes are before and after February the 6th. So if you're studying for these at the moment, I strongly suggest you look at the change log. So my recommended route for this particular certification may raise a few eyebrows, because I actually recommend that you do the Data Platform Fundamentals certification first, followed by the PL300 exam. And the PL300 exam is actually an exam that you need to pass to gain the Power BI Data Analyst certification. And then I recommend going for the DP500 exam. Now, I must admit that I actually did this route to pass the DP500 beta exam because that was recommended in the original post which introduced the certification. However, the main reason I recommend it now is because I honestly believe if you do the Azure Data Fundamentals certification first, especially if you're working with the data engineering services and your main focus on Synapse, and then you do the PL300 material, which gets you fully up to speed with everything in Power BI, that will put you in a better place to do the DP500 exam, because you do need quite a good level of Power BI knowledge for this certification. And if you've been more focused on Azure Synapse Analytics, this route will put you in the best frame of mind for it. Now, for anybody who's watching this and are feeling adventurous and you want to go and do both of the certifications that I've mentioned, here is my recommended route if you do intend to do both. So basically what I'm saying here is get your Azure Data Engineering Associate certification first, then do your Power BI certification afterwards, and that will put you then in a very good place to look to do the DP500 exam. So to help you study for these 2 certifications, there are a couple of subscriptions and licenses which can help. The first one is the Visual Studio subscription. And I've just had a question in the chat, and I will cover that quickly before I talk any more about the subscriptions. So would you say that DP500 is more challenging than the DP203? And I say it again for the benefit of those watching the video. I would say that it does, because you're focusing on less services than you do for the 203 exam. Like I said, the 203 Azure Data Engineer certification has quite a bit of breadth for services, whereas the 500 exam focuses on only a few. So it is fair to say that it can be more challenging, especially if you've been focusing more, say, on the data engineering services, and you need to basically get up to speed on your Power BI knowledge. So anyway, as I was saying, with the Visual Studio subscriptions, the two main ones that people go for are either the professional or enterprise subscriptions. If you work for a large enterprise, then you may get offered one of these subscription types. And when you get these subscriptions, you get, as well as being able to install that version of Visual Studio, you get what is known as Azure Credit, which basically means you get to spend a certain amount of money every month in Azure. So you can test deploying the services for these exams and everything using this Azure Credit, which can cost money. And a bit of advice, if you are practicing for either of these certifications and you're working with dedicated SQL pools, please make sure once you finish doing your work on the dedicated SQL pools, I highly recommend that you delete them straight away and then just recreate them when you need to again for studying, because they can cost a bit of money. And especially if you're using a Visual Studio Professional subscription, you will find that credit runs out quite quickly. Now, that's the other main point here. You can think of the Azure credit you get with these subscriptions like pocket money, because once they run out, that's it until the next month. It's not like real world pocket money where you may have one lenient parent that gives you some extra money behind the back of the other parent. Once it's gone, it's gone. So the license then that you might want to consider using, if you've not got one already, is a Power BI license. And the two main ones you'll probably want to look to use if you're going to study, for example, for the PL 300 certification, is either the Pro or a Premium license. Now, Premium, as you can probably imagine, does come at quite a cost. So the majority of people tend to use a Power BI Pro license, which is fine. However, I do highly recommend, if you're going to do that while studying, make sure you complement your learning with watching videos on how the premium services that come with Power BI Premium work. And this is so that you've got them visualized in your head before you look to do the exams. So I'm going to cover now some recommended Microsoft resources. So we've already seen exam pages in this session. And the only additional point about exam pages I want to highlight here is that if we go down to the bottom of the page and then scroll back up, you will see that you get some recommended learning paths to Microsoft Learn Material. And for those of you who haven't seen these before, these are basically online learning paths, online courses you can follow. So if I open one up, scroll down, you can see all the different modules you can do. If you are going to do these, make sure you log in with your Microsoft account, because that will help you keep track of the learning paths that you've done. So you won't have to bookmark every time that you finish to remember where you are. In addition to that, you may want to consider training courses, and there's two main types of training courses that you can look to do. There's the Microsoft official courses for these certifications, and then there's customized training courses you can do as well. Now, if you are going to look to do a customized training course by a company or a person relating to these certifications, make sure you select one by somebody who's reputable, because there are quite a few options available at the moment. So The next one is aimed more for those of you who work in a large enterprise, and that's the Enterprise Scheme Initiative portal. And this is something that's been introduced by Microsoft for the people who work in large enterprises. So you can log into this portal and you'll have access to a wide range of resources, including the exam pages and the learn material that I've just shown you. And in addition to that, and one of the more important things is that it gives you access to the official practice tests. Now, the official practice tests, which I think are currently done by MeasureUp, are going to be your most realistic experience of the exams you will get to do. Now, there are some reputable vendors that offer their own practice tests, and there are some not so reputable practice tests that are offered online as well. Now, all I'm going to say about those is that if you go down that route, and not only are you cheating the exam, you're actually cheating yourself. And if you try and use those to gain the certifications and get a role because you've got these certifications, it will become very clear to people very quickly you've not gone through the material. And I cannot stress this enough. And in addition to that, if you do get caught with this material, there will be serious consequences for you. So bear that in mind. So basically, look to do the official practice test if possible. And something I will mention here, when you go to book the exam, if you've not got access to the ESI, the Enterprise Scheme Initiative, when you go to book the exam, they offer you the practice test usually at a discount anyway, so bear that in mind as well. And I've just had a comment in about the ESI scheme. I'm guessing because it's aimed at enterprises, it would come out of costs, and I suspect that there is going to have to be some criteria for your company to get access to it as well. So basically, you have to work for a large enterprise like for example, a bank to get access to them or get access to the ESI. So I hope that answers your question. And the other resource is video courses. There are some quite good video courses for these certifications available online. Some of you actually may have noticed that two of the well-known video courses are now basically merged. And some of you have probably noticed that recently, especially if you've been studying for the Azure Architect certification. Now, before I go on to the next screen, I've just seen another question appear.
Your case, someone responding to a previous question, so you're good.
That's fine. That's fine. I've just noticed it as well. So, some other advice for you here, and again, this one may raise a few eyebrows. Whilst you're studying for these certifications, especially the DP500, you may find you want to improve your Spark knowledge. And to do that, you might want to look to enroll in the Databricks Academy. So, is the portal for the Databricks Academy. And as you can see on the screen, if you are a Databricks customer, partner, or if you work for Microsoft, you can register onto the Databricks Academy for free and get access to a wide range of sources. And there are going to be some of the trainings on here which you can take over and use in your Azure Synapse Analytics environment. For example, the knowledge you gain if you go through here working with, for example, Delta Lakes. So it is worth looking into if you've got access to this portal. And the other piece of advice, like I mentioned earlier, reduce context switching. So if you're planning to do multiple role-based certifications, I would silo them and focus on a specific area first. For example, the data platform certifications first. Like I said before, you look to do other types like the Azure Architect certification. Now, I do appreciate that I have put in a lot of advice and material in this session already, and I will put the last two portals I mentioned the links from in the chat, so you can all have a look after this session and see if you've got access to either of them. And because I've shared a lot of advice, I thought it would help some of you if I actually share my own study method with some of you. So what I tend to do if I'm self-studying, I tend to go through the Microsoft Learn material for an exam first, and I actually go through the Microsoft Learn material on the exam page, like I showed you just now. I then complement that with online video training from a reputable vendor, if it's available. And then I go through and do the official practice test for that particular exam. Now, I do this because I'm quite thorough. And the main point I want to get across here is that we are all different. We all think differently, and we all react to different ways of studying. So you will probably want to experiment and find which study method works best for you. I'm just showing mine as an example and as a starting point for some of you for ways in which you can experiment to find your ideal study method. And like I mentioned earlier, you could also have in-person training, which would be a quicker process because you will learn on the material in a short period of time. Now, as far as actually going to book the exam is concerned, make sure that the personal details you enter when you go to book the exam matches what's on your ID, because regardless of where you take the exam, you have to show ID. In addition to that, check that if you've got an exam discount. This is very important, especially if you're using your own personal email address to go book the exam, because if you click on the exam discount section on the left hand side and put in your work's email address, you might find that you're eligible for a discount. In fact, I've actually known some people who've been able to get 100% discount by doing this alone. So basically they got to do the exam for free. And finally, schedule a realistic location to do your exams. Now, doing the exams online became very, very popular during COVID. And if you do an exam online at home, there are certain rules you have to follow, and you get these rules given to you when you go to book your online exam. Now, if you do the online exam at home, bear in mind that you've got to work in a quiet environment. So, for example, if you've got a busy household, maybe doing the exam online is not the best option for you. Instead, look to do an exam in a test centre. And when you look to book your exam in the test centre, you usually get the chance to select one that's close to you. Now, I was quite lucky when I moved over here to the Netherlands. I actually found that my test centre was 10 minutes away from home, which was fine up until COVID started becoming a thing. So bear all of this in mind, especially a part of the exam discount. I want to make sure you all remember that point is quite important, because obviously it's going to save some of you a lot of money. So it says here, how's the training courses delivered on the... I'm just going to answer a question before I go to the final points. So I see there's a question in the point. Just double check a couple of questions here. So first question is, are there any specific Python or Scala questions in the DP203 exams? And if I remember correctly, by the material in the skills measured, which I sent over earlier in a link, I think you need at least an introductory level for, I suspect, at least Python for this certification. But like I said earlier, if you go through the skills measured and you follow the recommended learning paths of Microsoft Learn, that will give you an idea of the amount of Python and Scala knowledge you need. I can confirm though, like I said earlier, because you need more in-depth knowledge for the Azure Synapse Analytics for the DP500 exam, you will need a little bit more in-depth knowledge for those there. So somebody's commented about the fact that when they've done the PO300, there was SQL questions there. And yeah, if you have a SQL Server background, that can help with working with Power BI, and I did talk about that recently. And if anyone's curious about that, feel free to reach out to me afterwards. Now, another question: how are the Microsoft delivered courses on ESI? How are Microsoft delivering courses on ESI? I've not used the practice tests, but not the virtual classrooms in these courses. Now, I will be honest with you, I've not gone through and used the virtual classes myself in ESI. I do understand there's a booking option in place. When you go in there, you have to book the actual slots for when you want to use these virtual classrooms. So I would have to look and come back to you about that one. So, and I see that my moderator has put some links in. Anyway, moving forwards, some final points here. If you pass an exam, you gain one of these certifications, it doesn't end there. And you need to be aware of this. You have to renew the associate and expert certifications on a regular basis, like every 12 or 24 months. And you will get notified a few times by Microsoft before you're due to renew your certifications. And finally, the very last thing I've got to say, well, at least for this particular section, is to enjoy your journey, because there are going to be some things that you discover along the way. And of course, the way you study may mature as well. So, everybody, that is it. If there's any more questions for anybody, feel free to put them into the chat. And if I am busy answering, whilst I'm busy answering questions, I will put my contact details up again. And I will put those into the chat as well. And as you can see, I've got one additional point of contact on this as well. So, I hope everybody enjoyed this session. And I hope a lot of you gained knowledge from it, because I really want to help all of you with your certification options for Azure Synapse Analytics.